Power is getting the best out of yourself, because a lot of times people think of power as being related to other people or interpersonal relationships or getting people to do things more like influence. But real power, it's almost like a magnetic field. Like when you are functioning at a high level, then you attract certain kind of people and circumstances and situations that accentuate that high level and contribute to it. Like I like to say 1 + 1 = 7. I heard Grant Cardone, I think, or someone saying 1 + 1 = 5. And I think that, power is kind of like a sense of attunement. It's kind of like being in touch with your own intuition and living your life in a really, powerful way. It's not about being able to change other people. It's about being really in tune with what you're doing, and that will just attract the right circumstances to you. This is my army. If you've listened to my podcast episode on soul contracts, then you know that I believe that the significant relationships that we have in this life are kind of pre-arranged, only in terms of, I believe, the basic structure. I mean, what happens is individual free will. So we have the potentials when we meet someone for things to happen, but we could go in a different direction if we want. And so I think in that context that when I say this is my army or this is your army, I believe that the people that are in your life and have been in your life, I mean, this is just my own personal belief, are preordained, and those are the people that you have to work with. I mean, if you look for other people and you find other people, then those will be the people that were preordained. And if you look for other people and you keep getting redirected back to the people you already know, which sometimes happens. So just because they're your army or your people or whatever you want to call it, doesn't mean that they come well trained, and it doesn't mean that you come well trained. Like, people have to learn to grow with each other, negotiate with each other, and learn to care about each other. I mean, sometimes when people first meet each other, it's not the optimal relationship, but there's an opportunity. Like, there's an opportunity in every situation, like as Joe Dispenza says, to alter either your thoughts, actions, or beliefs, or more than one. And I want you, if you want to look at every situation fresh and think about what is possible. Like Jeff Bezos says he believes in something called a day one business, and I try to do that in business and in life. I try to not just do things today because I did them yesterday. I try to wake up and I try to ask myself, what should I do today? Like Elon Musk calls that first principles. I mean, it's not exactly first principles, but in my mind it's based on it that if the situation was starting from scratch, like Elon says, if you wanted to design the perfect car, the model car, the platonic ideal of a car, how would you do it? Like if you didn't rely on legacy systems, if you didn't rely on what you did with the last car, and you were just starting from scratch. I think every day in our life is an opportunity to start from scratch and to start each relationship from scratch. And I think that, this is your army. These are your people, and you're part of somebody else's army because it's a collection of people. And I'm not like implying like a militaristic, even though I'm calling it army. I'm just being like a collection of people that work together. You could call it a team. And yeah, let's call it a team. Okay. Is anyone coming to save you? They say, whoever they are, people that have big followings and are well known usually, that The most successful people are self-reliant. I agree with and disagree with that because no one's coming to save you, but somebody is coming to save you. So let me explain it. So most people, it's like they would rather have a victim mentality, or some people at least. I'm not saying most people, and make excuses for their life rather than taking full responsibility. It is important to take full responsibility for your life, but it's also important, I believe, to have faith in God or faith in whatever you believe is something bigger than yourself, because none of us has the wisdom, the insight, the knowledge, the understanding to navigate this complex world totally on our own. And sometimes God lets us, I believe, suffer or struggle to realize that either we're too dependent on other people, or that we haven't followed our own dreams, or that we haven't placed enough faith in God, or whatever the case may be. I mean, it's always towards growth. Like they say that success is worth it because it makes you the kind of person that you have to be successful. Like a lot of famous people have died recently. Like Sidney Poitier just died. John Madden died. There's a few others that escape me. It's kind of like, mortality, unless we get to the longevity where people are adding years faster than they're losing them. Some people are working on that. We'll see if it comes to fruition. But, they say time is the greatest gift because it makes us sharpen our priorities. And it's kind of like God or life or whatever you want to think of it. It takes away one crutch at a time. Like, in my life, like everything I've kind of used as a crutch, whether it be like other people or ideas about how the world is, has gotten taken away. It forces you to become. I was going to title a podcast called "The Desperation of Success," meaning that people, like they say, you have to be hungry. Les Brown says you have to be hungry, but sometimes what happens is you try so many things that don't work that you realize that the kind of things that you're trying are not the things that you need to try. And instead of just looking for options A, B, and C, you start to go to D, E, F, G, H, I, J. That's part of being resourceful. Like, if things come easily, that's why I think people are just born into wealth. Like, I've known a number of people that just kind of when a tragedy hits them, it really hits them because it's kind of like they thought they had life all figured out, because whatever problem came along, they could just throw money at it, usually. I mean, not all problems obviously can be dealt with money, but there's a strength of character that comes not just through suffering, but through rising up to do the best you can in the face of difficult challenges. And I think, in a sense, nobody is coming to save you. Like, you really have to bear total responsibility for your life, whatever happens to you. Just like Tom Bilyeu talks about this, but that's only half the equation, or a certain percentage of the equation. I don't know if it's more or less than half, but a big part of the equation actually is doing everything that you can do and being reliant on yourself, but also having faith in something bigger than yourself. Like, there's that famous quote, let me change the things I can change, except the things I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference. If it comes back to you, there's a famous saying that if you love something, let it go. And if it goes back to you, it's yours. And if it doesn't, it never was. And there's a lot of beauty and truth to that. I mean, some people let things go too easily. They just are quitters, or people that don't try very hard. But other people, it's like they hold on. There's the famous expression that says, the only constant in life is change. I think it was written by somebody like 400 or 500 BC, maybe Heraclitus or one of the other famous ones. And it's true. There's another famous quote that says, more modern, that, how does it go exactly? Pain is just something leaving the body. It's really just fear, the fear that we have of losing things, because we don't want to change. We don't want to do something new. Like, change is hard for me, but occasionally, and increasingly so, I reach the point where if I lose something, not through any fault of my own that I value, and I can tell that life is taken away, that I don't mean this in a perverse way, but I almost get excited that something better is coming. I mean, I'm not like that all the time, but it's kind of a healthy thing, I think, to be like that at least occasionally, because if you try your best and try your best and try your best and something is just not working and life takes it from you, and again, that's different than just quitting on something and giving up, because a lot of people are not persistent enough. Persistence and grit is like really what separates the winners and losers in life. I don't believe in so much losers or winners. I just think everyone's doing the best they can. But it's really grit and perseverance. But there comes a point of diminishing returns. There comes a point sometimes where no matter how hard you try, you're not going to get the thing back, or it's counterproductive to keep it. And at that point, you have to let it go. And if it comes back to you, it's yours, you know, for a period of time at least. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't mean it never was. It was at a certain point in time, but that time is over. Worse than the worst case scenario. So Lewis Howes and Robert Greene, two incredibly powerful individuals. And Robert Greene has had like 3 or 4 recent interviews with Lewis. I don't know if he's just breaking them up, because sometimes Lewis does interviews that are many, many hours, but I've seen him interviewed multiple times recently by Lewis, and Lewis is obviously one of the world's greatest interviewers. But I want to talk a little bit about the dynamics of these interviews, and then also a little bit about my own life. And then I'll get to why I call it worst of the worst case scenario. So Robert in his interview says that he wasn't successful, you know, relatively speaking, in terms of the standards that he is today, until the age of 39, when he wrote the 48 Laws of Power. I've read, I can't even imagine how many books I've read in my life, because reading has been like my secret weapon, like it is for Oprah and other people. And I must have read at least 1,000 books in my life, because I probably read 2, 3, 4 books a week, and I've been doing that most of my life. So, I mean, put the math together, maybe it's probably well over 1,000. But anyway, Robert says that, okay, the 48 Laws of Power is one of the most powerful books I've ever read, and it's just phenomenal. Robert said that his publisher didn't want to publish it. Robert's got a very unique style in his books, and I'm not sure if he does it in all his books, but all the books that I've read, he does it, I believe. Mastery, and a book on seduction, and a few others, I think. So on one side, he does like the principle, and then the other side, he does like an example. It's kind of in color. And Robert said the publisher didn't want to do that, and Robert basically said, take it or leave it, and which took a lot of courage, because, you know, at that point in his life, it could have been a big break for him, which it was, and to have the courage to walk away. Robert knew that he was very self-disciplined, and but Lewis asked him what would have happened if that deal fell through. And Robert basically said it would have crushed him. He might have come back from it, but basically he was at his last point almost of strength. And this is why I call it, you know, worst of the worst case scenario. You need a little bit of luck in life. You have to be very, very good. That's the main part of it. Like, I think life is a certain meritocracy to a certain degree. Like, Joe, because we get dealt bad hands, but we don't have to play the cards we're dealt. A lot of times we can, you know, deal ourselves a new hand, and I've talked a lot about that in different ways. But Joe Dispenza says that, you know, our personality becomes our personal reality. And, you know, Robert, in the interview, and I also want to talk about what he said about his stroke and a bunch of other things between Lewis and Robert. Robert said that basically he was at his lowest point, that, you know, I'm just kind of paraphrasing him and probably inserting a few things, but the takeaway was that, you know, he just didn't have the strength. I mean, he had been trying, and I don't think he would have killed himself, but he probably would have just, like, you know, resigned himself to, like, I can't do certain things. But it's so funny, because I felt the same thing in my life a few times, and I want to talk about it. Robert said, because the last maybe like 2 or 3 years I've had like incredible success, but it's, you know, I'm 56 years old. You know, like, you know, Gary Vaynerchuk, he has had great success, but he was in his 30s and still working at his dad's liquor store. So sometimes in a short period of time, you can have, like the bamboo, just shoot up, feet and feet and feet. So Robert said that basically that he had this inner voice that believed that he could do it, but the voice was like going down to a whisper and then like a faint whisper. Like it probably would have been 100% extinguished, but it would have been like 99.9% extinguished if things just didn't keep working out, especially at that point because he had tried so many things. And Lewis, I think, is a little bit different story because Lewis, and I think there's a lot of reasons for this. Lewis has kind of picked up on things quickly, like, maybe by his standards, not quickly because he was a pro athlete that he had to try this and try that. But I think Lewis is the kind of guy that, I think there's a strength to both because people that get into things quickly kind of have a little bit more self-confidence, which is very powerful. But people that struggle a lot more, those people have more tenacity, I think, because they know like what it feels like to be knocked down. And I empathize with both Lewis and Robert, but I think Robert a little bit more because some things have come easy to me, but a lot of things have not. And I think that the smell of success is like it's like an aphrodisiac when you've been to the lowest valleys. And I think like Robert said that he felt like he felt like giving up, but obviously he didn't. I want to talk a little bit about, there's a few more things I want to say about that, but I don't want to make this too long, and I want to talk a little bit about his stroke. Because that was a really powerful and heartfelt episode. I think Robert, to his strength, is a very genuine and authentic person. Like, he doesn't sugarcoat things. Like, I first wanted to say and tie this to the title of this podcast in terms of like worst of the worst case scenario. I've always been a person that believes, and I think it's 100% true, maybe 99% true. Hope for the best, but expect the best, but plan for the worst. However that saying goes. Plan for the best, but I forget exactly how it goes. But you know what it is, and that is true because an optimistic attitude in life gets you so far. Like, they've done studies that people that are pessimistic are actually more realistic. But to do great things, you have to like be totally oblivious to all the obstacles and pain that's going to come into your life because there's a lot of pain to do great things. Like Gary Vaynerchuk says, like eating broken glass every day. Actually, someone else said that. Gary Vaynerchuk said being an entrepreneur is like being punched in the face every day. If you don't have like tolerance is too weak a word. If you don't actually have like almost a love for the struggle, or what some people call the process, you're just not going to make it because it's too tough. But I can think of 3 times in my life where I had planned for the worst, and the worst was worse than I planned for. That is, I'm not going to swear, even though there's nothing wrong with it. That's an effing shock, F-I-N-G, because you always think, okay, if this happens, I'll do this. If this happens, I'll do that. If this happens, I'll do that. But what happens if something happens that's worse than anything that you've planned for? It either means that you're an extremely bad planner, or that you just have to really be resilient and cope with things that you didn't expect. They say life is what happens to you when you're thinking about everything else, and that most of the bad things you think are going to happen never happen, and the bad things that do happen are not things that you really planned for. There's a famous video that's entitled "Everybody Has a Right to Wear Sunscreen" or something like that. It's an incredible video. But I want to tie this back into Robert's stroke. So I think that the idea of like there's always a voice inside you, but sometimes it goes to a whisper, and then sometimes I don't know if Robert felt this or not, but I did. Sometimes I've had like 3 episodes of my life that come to mind where things went worse than even what I would have expected, like in a really bad way. It depends what your standards are, but by my standards, in a fairly bad way. And Robert, when he talked about the stroke, I was just feeling that life is so effing sad sometimes, but it's beautiful even in the sadness. Let me try to unpack that a little bit. That we have a certain number of opportunities in life, but there's a famous saying that what got you here won't get you there. Like, there's certain insights that Lewis has, and there's certain insights that Robert has, but they're different. Like, the insights that Robert's going to have from his stroke and from his suffering, and I'm not saying Lewis has not ever suffered as well. Lewis actually had a very traumatic childhood, and I think, he's like totally... There's a story in the Bible that says that there's two characters that went through the fire. When they came out, they didn't even smell like smoke. To me, that's an indication of, like, not even smelling like smoke, meaning that, like, you can't even tell that a person went through the trial. Like Lewis, if he didn't talk about, and I'm only mentioning it because he talks about it openly, if he didn't talk about his childhood, you would never... That's why you have to be compassionate to people in life, because you don't know what they've been through, or either have been through or going through. But Lewis is also a very courageous individual and a good person, and very smart. But he doesn't even smell like smoke. Like, the way he talks, there's... When I mean, like, smell like smoke, I mean, like, bitterness, resentment, fearfulness, things like that. He's still very curious. His eyes still sparkle. Maybe I'm the only one that notices that. But in terms of Robert's stroke, I haven't had a stroke. I mean, I had some health problems for a period of my life. But, I worked really hard on my health. Like, if you don't take care of your health, even if you do take care of your health, bad things can happen. But, they say health is wealth. I think Robert is realizing, if I can kind of put a few words in his mouth, that, the little things are the big things. And that, like, he talked about riding his bike and just getting enjoyment from, like, little things like that, even just being out in nature and things like that. But also the frustration of not being able to do the things that he used to do and want to do. And I think they say there's 2 points in life, 2 main points in life. When you're born and when you realize your why. Like Simon Sinek talks about, your why, the power of why. But there's also another saying that says, I don't know if it's the same saying or different, but there's 2 points in life, like when you're born and when you realize your mortality. And it's like, for some reason, I've always been a person that is kind of like aware of my mortality. I don't know if most people think about it. I'm not obsessed with it because I think it's important, like Joe Dispenza says, and Ed Bynett and others, to be very future-oriented. People that live in the past, they live like, instead of living 20 years, they live 1 year 20 times, as the famous saying goes. But you have to have some sense of, like, they say the value of time is to teach us, like, about priorities. Like, if we weren't mortal, if we didn't have time limits on things, we'd just be like, well, I'll get to it in 5,000 years, because it's like, and I've done a lot of study on life between lives, and I have strong feelings about that I've talked about. So I can't prove it, but I do have a sense that we, I believe are immortal. But, I'm not going to get into that discussion in this podcast because it's not directly relevant. But I think that there's great power in our strengths, but there's great power in our weaknesses. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think Lewis has, like, overcome a lot of challenges. Robert has overcome a lot of challenges. And I think that, it's just amazing to see what both of them have witnessed and bear witness to. How to effectively persuade. I have a saying that I came up with, is that I think it's original. I read so much stuff. Hopefully it is original. If it's not, please let me know. That whenever 2 people come into contact in a significant way, that's important, in a significant way, in good faith, and that's very important, because they have to be open to each other. If it's not good faith, they won't be open to each other. Then the one that is more certain, will influence to a much more significant degree the one that is less certain. Let me repeat that. I don't know if it'll be word for word, but whenever two people come into contact in a significant way, in good faith, the one who is more certain will influence to a much more significant degree the one who is less certain. Certainty is the key to persuasion, but I want to explain what certainty is because I think a lot of people misunderstand it. Certainty is not like big-headedness, argumentativeness, affirmations, or a lot of other things. To convince other people, to persuade other people, first you have to persuade yourself, because certainty comes from being persuaded yourself. That, like, if you really just believe something, like, have you ever been with a person and no matter what you say, they just have their own belief, and sometimes it's rigidity. I'm not talking about that. Sometimes it's lack of open-mindedness, but sometimes it's, what I'm talking about is something that's really well thought out and like a core, belief or principle to the person. So how do you get that? How do you convince yourself so that you can convince other people? And part of like convincing yourself is that it's pretty much most of the time not even that important to convince other people, because if you have to convince other people, then a lot of times you're trying to convince yourself. So what leads to that kind of certainty? The first thing is that it has to be true, because you can tell yourself things that are not true, and a lot of people believe things that are kind of like either delusional or not really that self-aware. But over time, reality sets in and kind of chips away at your beliefs that are not grounded in reality. So even if on the surface you kind of believe something, but it's not really true, or it's only partially true, then subconsciously you're going to know the truth that like reality is showing you and telling you by your experiences and what other people are telling you that it's not really true. So to be really certain of something so you can be persuasive, it has to be true. The other thing is that I was saying the other thing, but another thing is that it has to be integral or core to your identity, because we always act according to our identity. I described that at length in our last podcast. And for example, most people are about as unhappy famously or unhappy as they choose to be. If happiness is part of your core identity, happiness is a decision, you're just going to be happy, and the same with unhappy. Some people are unhappy no matter what happens to them. Obviously, there's degrees in between. But, whether you look for, I call it confirmation bias. Whether you look for people to be angry or people to be nice, you're going to find a lot of either one that you're looking for. So to be persuasive, it has to be part of your identity, because when it's part of your identity, it's going to be something that you just naturally integrate and promote. Another aspect to being persuasive is, in my mind, not everyone might agree with this, but to be of service. Because what happens is money is an expression of value. And I was talking a little bit about this with Aaron Doty, that he was saying his YouTube videos became much more popular when he started focusing on not just like specific topics that were popular, but that things that he could provide the most value on personally. And I do the same thing. Like, I have a list of 5 or 6 topics that I may or may not do next as YouTube videos over time. And each one, I think to myself, like, what is it, something that I really understand at a deep level, that is something that solves a problem for someone else, solves a question for someone else, that's meaningful. Peter Thiel said, what do you understand, and I'm paraphrasing him, what do you know that other people think is wrong but is correct? That's called like contrarian by definition. So something adds more value if a lot of people don't know it. Like, if it's just a trite thing that everybody knows and you know it also, like, yeah, you can share it with them, but they can get it a million other places. But if you have like a kind of a somewhat unique idea, insight that has value that other people, haven't realized, that's very persuasive. Because obviously, they say all great ideas get ridiculed, and then there's a whole series of things, and finally it's accepted. But you're more persuasive, you're more convincing if you thought things through at a deeper level. It's kind of like levels of the onion that, a lot of people are living at the first or second layer or the third layer. If you've gone down to the 10th layer, then you understand the 7th, 8th, 9th layers, because you've you've experienced it where other people haven't. So obviously most layers of an onion look similar, but in life there's all these different layers, of experience that, are unique. And if you've done something significant, you understand like all the pitfalls and obstacles that you had to face to go into that. So it's really important to do something that has value that's not obvious. And I'll leave it there for now. Your next crisis. We all know that life has trials and tribulations.